Hello, I'm Richard Miller, and this is Never Not Here. We're in New Zealand for some time, more than a month, and we'll stay some more time, another month. And there's so much to discover in this old but new land. It must be a new land because it seems very heaved up and very sharp focus, and yet it's got a ancient history that we're going to find out about. So let's just go right and introduce Barry Brailsford. So welcome.
Hi Richard.
Yeah.
Well, it's lovely to be with you today, and I'd just love to start with a karakia, which is a Maori way of asking for guidance and open the way for what we're going to share, because I'm going to go back into very ancient things, that some of which are considered to be sacred. So that's a good way to open it. And in this karakia, I'll simply be asking for the light at the core of creation to come into our hearts and minds, that we might walk in the light, that we might walk with compassion in our hearts, and we might walk with courage to carry our dreams into tomorrow.
So many times we just say that all of life is sacred if you're living it in a beautiful way. And so let's just say that this interview is sacred.
Yes, and to open the way for that, I'll use the old words and say this karakia. Yeah. Nā te maramatanga ki te nākau o te atua. Kia koha te maramatanga ki te nākau o te tangata. Kia koha te maramatanga ki te ao. Mā te maramatanga, mā te aroha, mā te kaha I whākau te whakaranui te ao, te hei muriora.
We were fortunate enough to participate in a Native American ceremony, but here in New Zealand. And I didn't know the words, but often we were talking to the grandfathers.
Yes.
And maybe that's what you were just invoking.
Yes, it's, I believe that the ancestors of old still play a very powerful part in our lives, no matter who we are or where we are. But we are, in fact, the sum of all that's ever been of our line, and that the gifts we have as we walk this earth today are gifts handed on in the DNA, handed on by our ancestors, and they're to be honoured for those gifts. In a very real sense, we are the ancestors. And if you want to see your ancestor, get a picture of your ancestors, just look in the mirror in the morning, because you're the sum of all that's ever been of your line. Yeah.
I just had that realization myself in a strong way in a sweat lodge. And I was wondering what the ancestors were as they brought in the hot rocks and said, "Welcome, grandfather." And then I just got that I really got that in a strong way.
Yeah.
That I don't own this DNA. I don't own this body at all.
Yeah.
And I don't even own this psyche or this, what runs me or my conditioning, or I don't own my... and then this is just like my challenge or my play or my contribution to planet Earth is to work with what I've been given.
Absolutely.
And accept it and do my best for those that came before and for those that'll go after.
Yes.
And so then it got really clear.
Yeah, the bringing in of the stones is very symbolic, and to call them ancestors is again very symbolic. And wherever I go around the planet to meet the indigenous peoples, to share with them in ceremony, I find that again and again they speak of stone itself as the first ancestor. And when I go into the old things of this nation, of these peoples, the old peoples of this land, the nation of Waitaha, I find that when they describe the creation, they speak of the great song that came into the nothingness, and the great void, and out of that song came the fire, the great fire that are the suns and eventually in the dying of the suns, the planets, and then within the planets themselves, that crust of stone, which can contain the building blocks of life. So they honor stone in this land, and in many lands, as the first ancestor of all life. So bringing the hot rocks into the sweat lodge, they were ancestors heated up a bit to offer something very special to that occasion.
Yeah. So, yeah, they come in red, actually. I didn't know a rock could get that hot, but some of us might think, okay, a song is it's kind of quaint, it's a way to worship and so on, but a song is a sound, and a sound is a vibration, and all of science says that we're made of vibrations. And so then the greater meaning of that word song is that we're all synced together, we're all in harmony together, we're all in resonance together, and that is a song. That is the song that they're talking about.
Song of the universe. Yeah. Yeah, and of course in modern terms they talk about string theory as the theory that gives us the secrets of the beginning of life and the creation of life and the continuance of life, and that's a vibration. So yeah, it's all about the vibration that created all that is, which is quite an amazing concept. And when you get deep into that subatomic theory of life and what we're discovering now, we're taking off veils that in the end bring us to very simple things. That it comes down to a song. That's a way of describing it.
I don't know exactly how to introduce this or where to go, but very so amazing. The moment I walked in here and saw the things that were laid out, I'm just going to show you a few things, but just check it out. There's this. This one is like the Song of Silence, right? Song of the Circle, Song of the Whale, Song of the Eagle. Look at these things. I mean, look at Sacred Wind. I mean, the Song of Stone. I mean, this is amazing. The Southern Serpent. I mean, these things are illustrated. Fantastic. What we can discover with this man, I just feel the tattooed land. I want to just show you how amazing this is. I mean, how can you possibly get it? The Song of Waitaha. Look at this one. Whoa. I'm getting a letter out of this here. Let me get some good pages. These are like what? Are these songs, are these kind of like, they're stories, or is this the mythology of the Waitaha?
Yes, the songs are chants, and they're chants. And when I was brought into that realm of Waitaha, before that, I was actually working and researching as an historian, and then that led me below ground into the world of archaeology. And as a collective, when I bring all the research that the archaeological community had brought together, the people called Waitaha would actually only occupy a few pages. That's all we had about them. And most of my colleagues said they were a myth. And then the elders of Waitaha, who I didn't think existed, they came to me after I'd written 2 books. One you just showed, The Tattooed Land, and another one about the ancient trails across the land called Greenstone Trails. And I'd written those 2 books, and out of nowhere, the senior elder of the South Island, he came and said, we'd like you to tell our story, the story of Waitaha. And I was stunned, and I thought, well, it's going to be a very short story. We've got about 3 pages about this people that's been researched, and we can collate. So the myth suddenly was standing before me. Here was a man who was saying, no, we exist, and now we're going to bring our story to the world. And I didn't understand at that time that that approach was based on the fact that 2 stars had come together in the heavens, as foretold some 4 centuries ago, and that allowed them to share their knowledge, to share their story, to share their sacred lore. Had no idea of that, but the approach was made, and I was taken to one of our rivers, the Rakaia River, up into the mountains where it comes out of the Great Gorge, and there I was initiated into the tribe of Waitaha, into that iwi, as we call it. And they said, we've now opened our library to you. And I thought, what does that mean? And I was told that they still held over 3,000 chants that told the story of that people and contained their sacred lore. And the meeting of those 2 stars in the heavens that had been told so long ago in prophecy allowed them to share it now. And that was in January of 1990 that sharing could begin. So it was truly amazing. But when we talk about chants, after they'd initiated me and said, now you can enter our house of knowledge, the door is open to you, and we have all these chants. And they said, would you like to ask a question? And I asked about an ancestor I knew who was on our 3 pages called the Rākai Hotu. And because I knew that this figure had come up again and again. And they said, oh, we have a wonderful story of Rākai Hotu. And they said, would you like to hear it? And I said, yes, it would be great. And they said, well, that would last 2 hours. And I realized at that time we actually didn't have 2 hours. And they smiled and said, well, we have another version. And I thought, well, this will be great. I'll get the précis. And the smile grew wider once they realized where my mind was going. And they said, well, actually, that version lasts for 2 days. And later on, when we went into that, it did last for 2 days. And it was about his navigation, and I was stunned to find that they were able to chant the 170 names of the members of the crew of this great double-hulled vessel that had come from Easter Island to New Zealand, that he had been the navigator of, and that was nearly 2,000 years ago. So I was really brought into a library beyond all understanding of libraries. It was, when we talk of songs, these are the chants, and they contain so much, and they are so amazingly accurate. They are of a sacred lore, they are maintained in a sacred way, and they go far beyond anything we could ever imagine that the Western mind might cope with. But that was their learning, and that was of their way, and very special, and held in a very sacred space. So that was my introduction to the songs, as we might call them, and it was overwhelming. I had opened, or they had opened for me, this incredible storehouse of knowledge, and it changed my life.
So you said when you thought about, when you wrote your first 2 books, Waitaha appeared. So then, where are the Waitaha? I mean, are they just invisible in the society and living as, they don't look like white society. Do they just fit in with the Maori society, or I mean, where are they? And are they unified, or are they many tribes, or is there very many people left? Who have you been introduced to?
Yes, Richard, we have to take a step back to explain who they are. They are Polynesian, so they are Maori, in that when the Maori came here, that name was given to them. It was a name that that came with the Europeans in a way, but I won't go into that. But they're Polynesian, and their roots go right deep into Polynesia, and they were based on Easter Island, which is interesting, that they should eventually sail here. But woven into that Polynesian cloak, if you will, there were two coloured strands, just two strands woven into the whole cloak, and one has a link back into the Mediterranean, so it's a Caucasian strand, very thin, very colourful, but there, and that brings in a whole other realm of gifts from the ancestors of that civilization, and there's a strand that comes out of Asia, and it's we have the names of these people who brought in these strands, but that's another strand, and again, not huge. We've got this amazing Polynesian cloak with these two bright strands woven into it. So they were in a sense a multicultural society, although 99.9% of it was Polynesian and Maori, and people in New Zealand who've heard of Waitaha, they, for various reasons, they've made distinctions and suggested they were pre-Maori and that they were different, and they've totally inflated the amount of those other strands and for different reasons. But it is important to understand they were Polynesians with these two extras.
I wonder, that brings me to a question, like if you want to comment on it or not, but I think a lot of people, especially when we talk about sustainability and when we study different societies and even sustainability of animal cultures, and how really can the land sustain this many people, even the planet Earth, and we say, well, only by the way we work with nitrogen, how we can set nitrogen in the soil artificially, and whether that's beneficial or not, or whether that depletes the other minerals because we pump the nitrogen so much, and talk about that. But I think Easter Island is one place that they point to many times, saying that those are weird, strange people because they depleted, I guess they cut all their timber, right? And then somehow the island wouldn't sustain them anymore in many different ways, but you're saying somebody escaped while there was still enough wood to make a boat, or I don't know what happened there anyhow. Is that something you can comment on too, or is that just a diversion of mine?
No, that's quite central to things, really. Yet these people realized that they could not, Easter Island could not sustain increasing population, and they decided to come to this land. They were great navigators. They'd already come enormous distances. They were as at home on the sea as they were on the land, in fact, in many ways more at home. So they explored, and they found this place, Aotearoa, New Zealand, and it was huge in comparison with the islands. Just a place of plenty, a place with a temperate climate and running through to a subtropical climate with such a long reach across the latitudes, and so it was. This was a place that they.
Is it said that before these immigrants, New Zealand land was uninhabited by a man?
No. When Waitaha came here 2,000 years ago, and this cuts across all our mainstream history at the moment, although there are several sciences that are opening a door back into these times, which I could go into later if you wish. But what I'm saying now is not just based on the story of Waitaha and their genealogies, which they hold really sacred, but it is now based around science, which controversy is rife in all of this at the moment because it's such a shift in understanding. But Waitaha, say when they came here 2,000 years ago, there were already people here, and people who'd been here for some time. Yeah. But they left Easter Island, and there was a planned migration, if you will, very carefully planned. And in fact, they spent 200 years charting the currents that brought them here and took them back again to Easter Island. They spent a couple of 100 years actually discovering all of the geology of this land and finding the ponamu, the greenstone, the jade, if you will, that would make magnificent tools. They really got to know this land before they brought out a major settlement. But every time they came over that 200-year period, and we have the names of all those navigators who kept sailing to gather that data, when they eventually came, they knew where everything was, and it had been set up in a very, very systematic way. But that was typical of Waitaha. I mean, they walked with big minds, and huge vision, and only came when they were ready. So they came and they left behind the people in Easter Island, but they did go back in big sweeps back through the islands. Once in every generation, they sailed back to that homeland and other homelands that were part of their lives, and they even gathered students from those places who'd been chosen to come to actually learn in this land. And up at Castle Hill, which is a place many people go to in the South Island, it's a great school of learning, and they were taught there. And in the next generation, they'd be taken back again, back to their bones, back to where their whenua or their afterbirth was placed beneath a tree, and back to their home, so that they live out their later days sharing what they'd learned here, and then gifting their bones to the original home. So it was a very sophisticated kind of society, and what happened in Easter Island, and I've studied this a lot. The kind of breakdown of that society is the best thing I could say about it, was that they became very isolated. Too many people for the resources. We've estimated they cut down 22 million of those pines, those special palms, really, the wine palm, I think it's called. And you wonder who cut down the last one. How could they do that? Because it was a food source, it was all kinds of things that they actually needed. But they became isolated. And that was after the fall of Waitaha, after the nation here, which had lasted as a nation of peaceful people, how that was actually destroyed. So that time meant complete isolation when that happened, and things went really downhill in Easter Island after that. And then once the slavers came in, and most of the people were taken to Chile, it was really the end of the way it had been. Yeah.
You point to these hundreds of years of really a plan, a great plan, right? And for the way our minds, us colonials, us Westerns, work, all done in an oral tradition, right? Because, I mean, they didn't have history books and stuff, or if they did, it was, I don't know if we found them or what, but so then there's this oral tradition already that you say that even now they know 3,000 chants. Some of the chants take 2 days to say, and they know the names and histories of family lines and mariners and so on and so on. And we hear about oral tradition in the Western society and think, well, there's the people that are visual and that read, and there's those that are auditory and hear, or otherwise somehow there's some that see a map and see dimensions, and others, I guess hearing has to be single file, right? You hear sounds one at a time. And but maybe the mystery of it is the mystery, here we're close to Australia. Australia's Aboriginal original people talk about the dream time, and they talk about something else that's not a linear type of thinking, or a linear type of cognition, or a linear type of they're not even in time, really, or space, if they're dream time, if I understand it correctly. And so then this is some kind of a greater connection, or something that we have lost as most of the population of the world. and it's only a myth now.
Yeah.
Right, and we don't, or most of us don't really believe in all that's hocus pocus stuff, and science hasn't found it. But I mean, is there great lore about, we talk about ancestors and so on, so I mean, what is the power to have a 200-year, 400-year history and plan to migrate and plan to chart the seas and a plan to chart the currents?
Yeah, well, it's a whole other dimension of learning, and it's quite remarkable. I mean, I've seen it in practice, and I've had it, well, say, used on me, in that, you know, I've worked with young people who had knowledge sung into them, in a kind of half asleep, half awake state when you're you know, late in the evening, late at night, and that's
as an infant, or at
no,
any
no,
age?
at any age, yeah, and then to get that knowledge back, all you need to do is put a key word there. It's like turning the key in a vehicle; it starts it up, and they can give it back to you. And I know that early on in my work, when I was at a marae where 143 of the old Waitaha tribes, because Waitaha wasn't a tribe, it was a nation of many tribes. 143 gathered in the far north, and over 4 or 5 days they discussed how much of the knowledge they were going to share with me, how many baskets, as they called it, they would open up. And after 4 days or so, they stood one by one and said, "Tautuku," to the death, meaning we give you everything, the most precious thing we have, which is the blueprint of life, our sacred knowledge. And so they did that, and later on, a friend told me that that night when I went to sleep, I mean, I'd actually been awake night after night. I got very little sleep. The elders would come and talk to me, but that very night, when I was drifting off to sleep, a group of them came and sat around me and started singing, started chanting, and I was only told this a couple of years later. But when I left that place and I come back to do the writing and to sit with them to receive the knowledge that I was to share, I knew things that I shouldn't have known. I mean, I couldn't believe the connections I was making between little bits of information and the big picture that was filling my mind. It was stunning. It was upsetting in some ways, because I couldn't understand where that knowledge had come from. But I know now it was sung into me that they had actually gifted that when I was kind of half asleep or asleep even. But I've seen it work. I've seen young people who've gone through that process, who, you know, when the key word is said to trigger that information, it simply came out. And yeah.
So we hear stories of people channeling, right? And we even hear stories of authors that said, "Hey, I didn't even write this book. I was riding in the backseat of the car, and in 2 days this thing poured out of my hand." And so and they call it a download, you know. But I showed so many of your books. I mean, are your books downloaded?
No, they're not. No, the elders are very particular about this. I mean, the information it is given. It's just the way it's given. I mean, people can go to sleep nowadays. I mean, there's research done on this, and the tape recorder is running in their sleep, and they've absorbed knowledge in the night. You know, quite a lot of work's been done around this, is setting up that receptive state, and you've got this quietly going on in your sleep, but you receive that knowledge. You can play it back. No, everything that was given to me was in response to a question. So it was wherever my mind went, then the information came, and I had to after a session, I would go away and, or during the session, I would actually have a pad and I was drawing pictures because I'm a very visual kind of person, and little arrows and the odd word here and there, and I was absorbing what they were telling me. But then after that session, I would sit down and turn that all into a complete record, reinterpreting my pictures and whatever. But they might be giving me the law of rainbows, which is a huge and extensive understanding of rainbows and their place in their lives. And yeah, that might be one day, but the next day I'm asking about something quite different, and it could be about a particular ancestor who I want to know about. So it was interesting, and only when I came to the writing and they gave me the outline of it all started to come together, and I knew just the shape of it. I could see it happening to cover the period of Waitaha, the whole history and different aspects. When I started to do that, I had to gather from all kinds of places and meld them in. And what they'd been teaching me were principles, not just facts. And the principles were around, well, Rakai Hotu is going to begin a great journey of exploration down the mountain lands of the South Island. And on that journey, he's going to be joining each mountain peak to a star, and he's going to be joining the source of each river to a star. And all that's going to be sung into song. So he's doing that. But I have to know when he begins that journey, the principles of beginning a journey, the signs he would wait for, how he would prepare himself, and then how he would make that kind of journey. So once you learn the principles, you can apply them to different situations. And they kept telling me, we've given you all of this background, we've given you all these foundations, but you have to bring life to the characters. You have to paint the colors in, because we've given you the principles for doing that. So they give you the skeleton of the journey, all the vital detail, but you have to bring that to life. And when I was writing about, say, Rakai Hotu, there was months where I just lived with him, if you will. I didn't read any books, I didn't watch any television, I didn't go to movies. I let nothing else come into my world except thinking about his journey and the spirit of that journey and all the things that had to come in to colour that journey. And when I'd finished the book, it had to go. There were 5 elders who saw it. It was tapu. The book itself was tapu. And they had to say that it is fine. They had to sign it off. But only those 5 in the whole of this land. And and they were happy. The only things they changed were, there were 8 changes, and this was a fail-safe thing within it, a security thing that they'd put in place. And they gave me, for instance, the recent name. They'd given me the common recent name of a place like Whakatane in the North Island, but then they put in the old name beneath that. So if anyone had stolen the manuscript and it came out with that name, then the finger would immediately be pointed at that person. And they swapped the name of the Pacific Ocean with the Tasman Sea. Swapped them right over. Just clever things to keep knowledge safe until it was actually published. So, yeah, it was an interesting way to come at things, and it required a lot of my mana, my creativity, to give it life, rather than coming in.
Maybe even, besides your creativity, in a way, your surrender, because what I'm saying is, okay, we talked about having knowledge sung into us, and we talked about other people that channel, and we don't know if it's sung in, and we think that maybe, with the talks and the people that we meet and so on, we're thinking that all of us are potentially, at least, hooked up to every knowledge on the planet Earth, at least, if not whatever the universe is. Let's just keep it in the planet for now, and and people talk about these downloads and stuff, and so then you said that you were given principles, but in another way you were given keywords, and so then all those songs had the potential to flow out of you, and even some, it sounded like from what you said, some people were surprised that you got too much, or you put it together more than they had intended. And it sounds like you have found keywords and have actually decoded a great amount. I mean, did you feel a resonance with what I'm saying? Or, I mean, you are definitely a special person.
Yeah.
Because of your contemplations,
It's interesting what you're saying, in that every chapter of Song of Waitaha, which holds this old knowledge, has keywords in it, key things that if they weren't there, then those 5 elders who had signed the book off wouldn't do so. Because for those who carry the ancient law, and they're very few, they'd be looking for those keys to know that I had gone to that level. I had gone down and gone to the foundations of things. So that was important. And most people reading the book won't pick up on those at all. They wouldn't see them, but they had to be there. But yeah, we're into a whole other, because you see, the elder said to me, everything that's ever said, everything that has ever been, exists forever. And they called that the Song of the Ages, that all knowledge and all that has been placed out there still exists. It's as if it all goes into a different dimension, and it's not lost from us at all. So they called it the Song of the Ages, and they said nothing is ever lost; it can always come back. And I really appreciate that understanding. But you take me into a realm where I have no certainty. I know how I've operated and how they asked me to operate. I never at any time felt that someone else was there, kind of downloading. I always felt that I was in a special space to write, and I've had a Māori kaumātua of great insight explained to me not long ago that something magical happens, and there's a Māori word for this, when the personal heart and the universal heart, the collective universal heart, come together. And when that happens, then something very special takes place. It's a very special time when we can get into that space. And soon as that was explained to me, and that was only some months ago, I began to understand a little more about how I wrote, and that there was always a connection that was far beyond me, but I really have never gone deeper than that. But I've never had any sense of a person out there somewhere downloading stuff.
Of being possessed.
Yeah, because the elders were said, everything you must do is in your mana. That is your essence, your spirit. It's that is the core of everything. And in the Māori world, it's the honouring of that mana, that spirit, that they see in everything. So you have mana, I have mana. Every single person who might view this has mana, and that's your spiritual essence, and that's indestructible. That is of forever. That's how they say it. It's of forever and a day, and it's the honouring of that spirit that is so much part of Waitaha life. In other words, stone has spirit. There's something there that is of the essence of stone, and every stone is different. Every kind of stone is different. And I've been to the lab in in Wellington, the geophysics lab, where they've got stone that's 350 million years old, being tested for something, but you can actually hear it emitting something, if you like, a song that's unique to that stone. So stone has spirit, and water has spirit, and lightning has spirit, and the trees out there have spirit. Every animal has mana. Call it mana. Everything has mana, and the mana of everything is to be respected. And when you live that way, then you can't rape the earth for its minerals without asking, and without looking deeply into the rightness of that action. And you can't go fishing and the first fish you catch, just take it home, because you have to honor the mana of the first fish you caught, and you gift it back to the ocean, and thereafter you can fish for your food. You can't just go and cut down any tree and not undertake a little ritual that tells the tree that it's the end of its time, and go through a little action, which will be take a little bit of the tree, a branch, and just caress its trunk and saying, well, the blade is coming, and your timber will be used in a good way. And it could be that the timber of that tree becomes the hull of a great waka, a great canoe that's going to carry the people hundreds and hundreds of kilometers across the ocean. But it's all the honor, it's in the honoring of mana that life made sense. That was the integrity of everything. And we've lost that, There was a time when we had a wonderful understanding, I believe, in our ancient ancestors. We might call them pagans or whatever, but they honored the spirit of the trees and the rainbows and the waters and the stone. They truly honored that spirit. And then later on we were told there is one God, and the God will meet with you in
later
the house that you build, and then you will go to the place of gathering when you die.
Yeah.
But that wasn't their way, and in fact Waitaha didn't worship anything, but Waitaha revered all life. Reverence for life, reverence for the mana of everything was the core to life.
Mm.
Yeah. And in not worshipping anything, that meant that they upheld their own mana, that we all stand tall. We don't bow to anything. We give gratitude for everything around us. We hold all life in reverence. We uphold our own mana.
We operate so much in the West, at least, and in my mind and in the people I've known, we operate in our minds, and we have ideas that we want to honor the mana. We want to live out of honor. We want to live out of some reverence, right?
Exactly.
And then yet, when we're living in the mass and the millions and the billions of us, we say, yeah, but now we don't have time, We're doing this today, but we're going to honor that. Okay, on Sunday, like you said, or we're going to honor it, or someday I'll find that connection and honor, And so then we think, okay, that's a good idea. Nobody's going to say, no, that's not the way to live at all. Don't honor anything.
Mm.
But in the meantime, we're talking about original peoples that already lived that way, what we're trying to get to. We're kind of incredulous, saying, well, 2,000, 4,000, who knows, 60,000 years ago, they were honoring mana. They were honoring everything, and everything was sacred, and everything was actually a communion with God, and everything was, not separate God, but just, it was a communion with life. So then when you start to look at all the ancient knowledge, all the ancient songs, all the ancient traditions, all the ancient ceremonies, all the sacredness, all the symbology, everything of the ancient peoples, so much of which is deemed or seems to be secret, really it's going to be all about the same thing, about how to hold on to that honoring space, right? And how that everything is mana, right?
Exactly.
And that if the world had that somehow, I don't know. So what I'm asking is, like, I'm not a scholar, really. I just kind of go where my nose leads me. And lately it's led me to original peoples, because I came to Australia and I feel like my audience in the West really want to know. I mean, there's such a mythology that we know that there's really about the Aborigines, about dream time, about, you know, is there another dimension, like, which is maybe not another dimension, it's this dimension. And, you know, that we're too busy for it or whatever. Somehow we run our lives just by good ideas and don't really, maybe it's a felt sense and it has to be felt. And so then I'm kind of taking this a little bit long as a question, but it's really, I really got it solid in my mind, because I did participate in an Aboriginal event which was called Tent Embassy, and Tent Embassy was in Canberra, and it was the 40th anniversary. And it was a coming together of maybe 20 families or tribes, you know, 20 out of 200, 20 out of 300 or whatever. It's probably a small fraction, you know, but I could see that there was a mana there and an honor, and I could see that there was also a contention about it. And then there was also a contention about whether, you know, like what should be shared, what should be held tightly. And, you know, and I mean, I was allowed in and I was allowed to have a camera. Somehow I have good mana or something. The media was up on the steps, you know, of the cement steps that are on the outside of the lawn, waiting for the 5-minute interview that they were going to get, you know, all day in the sun. It was blistering hot, you know. And these ladies were all dressed up in their presenting like TV dresses and makeup, and they were being toasted out there. But anyhow, and then I participated in Sundance, right? And Sundance is a Lakota Sioux ceremony, and it's one, and I've been told it's the strongest ceremony in any Native American. And Sundance is at least 4 days, but it's actually a whole way of life, and it's, you know, it has to do with fasts several times a year and all kinds of preparation things that I don't know anything about. And I did find out that one of the chiefs came repeatedly to New Zealand to share this dance, and he said, this is a call for world peace, this is a prayer for world peace. And part of the dance has a symbol of a tree, an energy spiral, you know, an energy pole, and prayers are tied to it, and my prayer was up there too, and mine certainly was. Actually, my prayer was that everybody could express their truth in their own peace without having to pound somebody, you know, or without having to submit or dominate, you know, that we could just express ourselves and be received, right? My prayer was, so then what I'm saying is, this one chief wanted to share this, and he actually had a website and photos out there. Even 9 years ago, there was a whole lot of sharing, and but now it's gone back in, and it's retracted, and this Lakota Sioux, the ones that are in charge now, say, no, this is sacred. Some say that only a full-blown Native American can even participate or see it, and then some say, no, it should be open and shared. And so then what I'm saying is 2 stars came together, right? And so some certain Maori elders, 5 of them, 8 of them or something, or more, 140 tribes or this, said, okay, Barry is going to be somehow our chronicler, our historian for the West or something, that we're going to talk about the mana and how it works, right? And how the world can be healed and how it always was healed, right?
Exactly.
And then others, there's a contention to it. Others said, no, this is our secret, sacred knowledge. I mean, even now, I suppose that play is in, I'll just get your comments on that, you know, because this is not all that simple, right?
No, it's not. Not at all. And those who made the decision that they would act on the coming together of the 2 stars and act on that prophecy. The prophecy actually said that 2 things could now happen. The first is that the ancient knowledge could be shared with the whole world. And, you know, written in English by, in fact, a European, by Pakeha, because I'm not Maori. But you know, and they put out this call, and I mean, I knew nothing apart from those 3 pages that we'd gathered, and here they are putting me into that realm. So they were very brave. That was a decision of huge courage, but they had the mana to make that decision. It was theirs to make, and they made it. And yeah, and then the gathering of the 142 tribes, they confirmed it, and yet beyond that point, there were people who suddenly found out they were Waitaha because of what was written. They didn't know, but they suddenly found that their story was being shared and acknowledged and embraced even by heaps of people simply by buying the book, who knew nothing of them and weren't of them, you know, and some people found that really hard. They discovered who they were, but at the same time, 95% of the books of Song of Waitaha that were sold weren't sold to Māori. They were sold to Europeans who saw a dimension that they thirsted for. You know, and that's what you're talking about, this understanding of spirit, that mana, if you will, that there was a way in which we could operate with mutual respect for each other and also for the environment, and live within that, and that thirst was there. So there has been controversy around this, all kinds of people with their own agendas have jumped in and grabbed pieces of it and run away with them. I mean, the fact that I mentioned that, there was a European dimension in the coloured thread that came in, and these were the people who came out of the West, the Urakehu, who finished up in Easter Island, who came out of the West. That's what their name means, the people who came out of the West, who were white-skinned and blue-eyed and fair-haired and red-haired, and their genes, they still come up in different generations. We talk about the red-headed Māori, and the fact that there's an Asian dimension comes in. But different people ran away with their own agendas. So there was controversy, but the elders always took the long view, that the world needs this. The stars have spoken. They've come together. Now is the time for the old knowledge to be shared, and the second thing was time for the people of peace to stand and walk tall again. And that's fascinating, because that prophecy came to pass in 1990. The stars came together in January of 1990. 1990 is a watershed in world history. We have Mandela freed from prison and becomes the president, ultimately, of South Africa. That apartheid system is dismantled. The Berlin Walls come down. The communist system, that great communist monolith, and Soviet Russia, that's dismantled peacefully by Gorbachev. The Cold War ends. It's a time of huge opportunity for the peace to come again.
I lived that time really strongly. I was actually in Italy, and I was living, and I was totally amazed at kind of dismantling of oppression in a way. It must be oppression one.
Yeah.
And it is still now, and I mean, not there, but everywhere where different peoples are somehow forced to align, maybe they can choose to align, because it was so amazing. Like, I was in Italy, and the common market was struggling. There was no euro at the time, and they were trying to pull down borders. And I remember leaving Italy at every border, that there was kilometers of trucks stopped. You know, they have to go through and show their papers at every border, and they changing money, I suppose, just to sell in France, or then they move on to Germany, or however, you know, however goods moved. Do we need Danish kroner or something to sell over here? And it was just a mess, and they were struggling so much to come together. On the other side, the whole communist system was coming apart. And right then, in a year or two, then Yugoslavia was just butchering each other, you know, all the Bosnia tragedies and the Serbia and the Croatians. I knew many Croatians, and I mean, I was baffled. Like, it was like a time of total unknowing and total, like, destruction of all my thoughts of what, you know, what is happening in this world.
It was a time of huge opportunity. I believe we live in one of the most exciting times in human history. I think we've come to an incredible watershed, and it's a time of choosing. And I believe that it's a time of huge hope. I truly believe that it's a time of hope, and it's a time when we're having to face all kinds of things and look at the truth of things. When I went to the Hopi people in '92, and I went to Grandfather Titus, who was 112 at that time, a little man who looked like a 10-year-old, and an amazing elder, and we shared a lot of time, and he sent us off with a wonderful prayer on a huge journey of 13,000 kilometers by road to take the sacred Pounamu, the healing stone of New Zealand, around to 12 of the old tribes, and they were the peace tribes of former days, and give this stone. And that journey had to be made in 15 days between an eclipse of the moon and a partial eclipse of the sun. And it was made, and it was incredible because we met the right elder every time. There were no phone calls, no letters, nothing at all, but they were waiting and saying, you know, we saw you in the prayer, the smoke of the prayer fire in the morning. We knew you were coming. It was a most remarkable time. But when we got back to Grandfather Titus, he was so filled with joy, and prior to leaving, he'd sat there with me and he'd wept, and he said, I weep for my children and my grandchildren. I weep for your children. I weep for the world. And when I got back, something had happened in his mind. He said, we're going to win. There are enough one-hearted people, those who speak their truth and walk it, to save the nations and save the planet. There are enough one-hearted people. And he went on beyond that to say that those who through greed and through corruption and through wrong actions are destroying the world at this moment are sowing the seeds of their own destruction. And in a sense, I feel that he was predicting the global meltdown that's come, that, you know, there is a shift in humankind at the moment. We have had enough of all those kind of things that we've kind of worshipped in a way, that, you know, if you work hard enough you can become a millionaire. Well, you know, we know that's a load of rubbish. We've got to share, and it hasn't been happening, and there's a hideous growing gap between those who have and those who don't, and there's been a huge gap between those who are free and those who aren't, and what's happening in the Arab countries is an expression of what also came to pass with the Hopi, because I don't know where this came from, but when I went to the Hopi and I sat with elders, and the first thing I was asked was, what is this age? Tell us what this age is. And out of nowhere I said, it's the age when there are to be no more secrets. And I had no idea about the internet. I had no idea about the fact that there would come a time when we had cameras and you could take a picture of terrible atrocities and abuse of peoples and the use of force to impose policies that were the detriment of everyone, and that the world can know in a second what's happening somewhere, things that could be in the past, hidden away. So the truth of things is coming out in a powerful way, and the resistance to the corruption and the greed and the use of violence, that resistance is organized through these little cell phones and cameras, the cell phones that are such a huge advance. So there is change, and this is an age of huge change. And I believe it's the age of hope, that we have huge opportunities to choose a path to walk that will bring us into a much better future. And around that, you see the work I've been doing for the last, well, we've been doing the last 4 or 5 years really, is around bringing healing to the past. You know, you speak of what happened in Croatia and Bosnia and whatever. Those people had an opportunity to create a peaceful world. They had the opportunity with the breakup of Yugoslavia to sit within a natural boundary, find a home for their people, and live at peace with each other and their neighbors, and they chose not to. They chose the way of revenge. They chose the red path of war. They chose to use ego gone wild to create power structures and use the military in ways that were devastating. So they chose the path of revenge rather than the path of truth and healing. And I believe that we're at this space now where we can face the truth of the past. We can't heal the past until we face the truth of the past and then move into that place of forgiveness. And that's what Archbishop Tutu did in South Africa. He created the Truth Commission to bring those who had used oppression, had used force, and had used murder as a systematic means of expressing policy, bringing them before the families of the dead, making them face them, giving them the opportunity to ask for forgiveness, and then clearing the way for all to move on. And this applies in every life. You know, within the family, there are truths to be faced and forgiveness to be made. And forgiveness doesn't mean that we forgive and forget, because there's things that have happened we never need to forget. We shouldn't forget. Doesn't mean walking away from evil that has been done. It means acknowledging it and then freeing ourselves of the chains that evil has wrapped around everyone, so that we can move on. We have to move on, but we have to do it in a good way. And it's not just in family, of course. It's within community. It's within nations. You know, we have to acknowledge the truth of the past and then seek forgiveness for what has happened in the past. And we see it happening around the planet. I mean, our Prime Minister, Helen Clark, she went to Samoa and placed the truth of an event that happened there after Samoa came under our protection after the First World War, and there were our policemen who were supposed to be looking after the people committed an act of atrocity, and that's not forgotten, not in Samoa, but had never been acknowledged here, not so openly. And she placed the truth there and asked for forgiveness. And that's what people need. They just need to hear that the hurt and the pain is acknowledged. And they need the opportunity to forgive for that and then move on. And it's happened in a number of ways. I mean, she as a Prime Minister did this a number of times. You know, because we treated the Chinese very badly when they came to New Zealand. The time of the gold rushes and thereafter, even put legislation in place to discriminate against them. So I go back to with the hope of this age. And I go back to the old thing that the elders told me about this nation, about our people, about how we should be. And these words go back through time. They sum up this nation. They set me there and they said, all born of this land are of this land. And I thought, wow, is that a thing of blood? And they saw my face. They saw a touch of concern, I believe. And then they smiled and said, all who sleep beneath the mountains of this land are of this land. And I thought, wow, where can you sleep beneath the mountains? Where can you sleep here and not be beneath a mountain? Because that's our land. It's a land of mountains. And I thought, wow, that's very inclusive. I love it. And then they smiled again and said, and all who come to this land from afar and call it home are of this land. And I thought, wow, you can base a society on that.
There's a bunch of things that have really triggered me to mention. I think first is about acknowledging, because that's really what I'm all about, is to get places where we cut off and where we just sweep things away and acknowledge that, because I see that through that cutoff, we're cutting off from our own heart and our own connection. And so then that limits us totally to what we can experience. We become just a mental robot because we've just cut that other part out just because we don't want to face how mankind mistreats mankind, even if it's not me, even if it's my grandfather or relatives. But somehow that denial is so amazingly powerful to limit and limiting, powerful to cut off all your real humanity. And just to be at 10th Embassy 40 years, okay, I say this story like this. I say that for the sacred fires at 10th Embassy have never been extinguished 24/7 for 40 years. That's 15,000 days. 15,000 days of actually a prayer and a request for an acknowledgement. And my God, there was no acknowledgement whatsoever. It was just no closer whatsoever. The whole media and everything, the way that was handled and what was focused upon and how these Aborigines were discounted and saying they're not the masses, they're just a few radicals, and it just discount, deflect. And all we have to do, is 3 words, we'll deflect something. He deserves it. They're drunks. Whatever. That's the cut right there. You cut all connection. That's the acknowledgement part that I totally agree with you. And that's like my whole message, or like what I'm moving on, what I base my life on. The other thing is that I want to say is, like, you said that there are enough good people. There are enough people of peace. That the Hopi elder said there are enough good, he realized that there are enough good people of peace. And I say that, the hope is actually stillborn unless it's followed by an action. And it's like what my whole thing is like calling the good people of peace to come forward. Stand out in the square and just say, I'm a person of peace, right? And I'm here. Somehow, and all the hope in the world is really stillborn unless it's followed by something called action. And we don't know what that action is. We don't have to know it. How are we going to know? Until we just have to stand up and stand at the void, actually. The void of what to do, what not to do. And know we're together. I was thrilled by when Occupy Wall Street started and people started coming out in the square and just saying, look, I don't know what to do, but I know it's not working. It doesn't work for me. How about you?
Exactly.
So some things become clear, right? I mean, we could see that even if we're not an elder, but we're so lucky if an elder tells us that.
Mm.
And then we can just feel it in some kind of a reassured way.
Yeah. Enough one-hearted people to save the nations and save the planet. The one-hearted people who speak their truth and walk it. And that's the second part, isn't it?
Yeah, and
hope
walk
is
it.
in the walking. The hope is in the doing. And you know, that's what happened in Egypt and Libya. It happened, you know, and Tunisia. The change came because the people walked it, and they walked it, some of them to their deaths. But the commitment was total. This commitment for a better world for themselves and their children. And I think it's always about the children.
Totally not now. I mean, we're just making a cesspot to give our children, right? On a planet Earth that doesn't work on any front, you know, whether it's commercially or financially or economically or environmentally or energetically or, I mean, everything is broken, right? It seems like.
And that gives us huge opportunity. Until you bring it to that place, until it comes to that place where you have to stop and say, it's all wrong. It's broken, as you said. Got to fix it in a good way. I think more and more people are challenging, questioning, not accepting that this whole society based on materialism and increasing the productivity a nation by 4%, and if they don't do that, then they go into meltdown. This is all crazy. We've got to get way away from that. We've got to find a future based on real things, not illusion. I think a lot of life today is based on illusion. That all these material things we gather around us are going to give us happiness.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just so superficial.
Oh, yeah, it's way worse than that because, like, okay, some things have substance. Some wealth has substance, but so much wealth, is just paper. It's just derivatives and stocks and bonds and all kinds of things that, tomorrow they could just disappear. And, and it doesn't even have substance, much less whether it fulfills us or not. And but it's a game of thought structures that are moved around on a board, and I guess it seems like a fun game. Many people aren't having fun at it, though. Right?
True. Yes.
So we don't know what it even means for people of one heart to stand forward, people of peace to stand forward, because you could just look at our Western tradition. We could say, okay, there was the Christ, there was the Jesus, there was the 12 disciples. We talk about the 144, we talk about the 144,000. But are these the people that are going to save the world, or is this the seed? In other words, I'm the guy that's talking to you and talking to everyone I can possibly talk to. The 144,000 have to become the 144 million, right? I mean, where are we going to stop? And coming forward means to use your engagement, use your mouth. That's how I see it. I don't know. I mean, people think that standing back and letting the 144,000 save us. I mean, we want a savior, right? But you're it. You are the savior. That's how I see it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's a spirit that moves, and I think there's change. I think the spirit of change is becoming very, very powerful. And the one-hearted people who are walking their truth now, they're the key to so much. And they don't have to see a big plan. They just have to see where they make their contribution. And we've had an amazing time of disaster and pain around the planet, and there's been locally the Christchurch earthquake has has taught us, if you will, thrown us back into community, has called forth huge courage and compassion, has galvanized the whole nation into giving and understanding. On the west coast where I was born, there were 29 miners who were killed in a mine, yet the whole nation was affected by that. People in Auckland wept for those families and what happened. Not quite understanding why, but there's been a whole release of compassion, a whole shift in the way that we think of ourselves as Kiwis. I believe that it's shaken the old values that we've been working with for quite a long time around what really mattered in life. A bigger house, a bigger car, that stuff has become quite superficial. People are focusing much more on family, on community, and giving. Giving and giving and giving. And then you look at Japan and what, 22,000 people wiped off in that huge tsunami. And, the world's response to that. And, people really felt for those families. I believe that. It's happened in so many places, and these are natural changes. This is life. This is just how the world is. I don't believe that we're being visited and punished in these catastrophic ways, and I don't see any problems around 2012. I think it's just a time of change that's been heralded a long time ago, and that's fine, because I've seen so many of the old prophecies that I've been walking with and they've come to pass. And there's something, there's almost another dimension in place that some of those of huge wisdom of long ago were able to bring into play. So I believe it is a time of huge change, and it's happening on many levels, but it's a time of huge hope, because it's bringing us back to things that really can work for human beings as humans, bringing us back to what truly matters, shifting our understanding of priorities back to where they've been a long time ago. And anything we learned from the past, if I'm sharing sacred lore about Waitaha, it has to be readapted, changed for today. But we can do that. These are, I believe, universal truths that are here to stay. We just have to find them again and walk in the truth of those things in a good way.
I mentioned that I have a European part of my life, European history, and these are old structures, right? Politicians come and go, but the bureaucracy, the apparatchik, is there for a long time, right? And so then I also know the modern, I also know the young, I also know the students, I also know the universities, I also know the new designs and the designers and creators and creatives, and I run into these, right? And new structures are needed now, we know that, right? And new structures, the tendency is in a way that is actually dangerous and damaging of how the world is moving, in a way that it's taking away all control, or like self-determination is a thing of the past, really. Kind of like we're all a dependent society. We're all dependent on something, It turns out to be world business or somebody else's idea. We're dependent on a loan, basically. We're all interest-paying units, and somehow that's where the world has been pushed to. And then As an example, you know, students would tell me that designers and so on would say, well, we design all these great projects in school, but then when we get into the community, nothing gets built, right? There's such inertia. It's unbelievable. Nothing happens on our streets. No new community spaces. No new, you know, a few things are commercialized and a few billionaires have some ideas to push things through. And then they say, well, maybe the only opportunity is in Spain. Okay, Spain is, when Franco went down, the bureaucracy got flipped over. And even if it was 40 years ago, still, the Italian bureaucracy or the European bureaucracy is hundreds of years of tradition and stasis, right? And pay me first, right?
Yeah,
and what are you going to get from me? And then another place, the hottest spot is probably Berlin, which was just totally flipped over too, because all the communists, you know, they're still in there too, I suppose. But somehow, what does it take for change? And so then I look at large structures and old structures and say, no change here, please. United States is not going to make any astounding discoveries. Neither is Europe, neither is Russia. And I look to small countries like Australia or maybe like especially New Zealand to lead the way, really. And who's going to lead the way even in New Zealand? It's going to be Christchurch. That they could say, look, we need a community reconstruction bank. We need to pool our resources. We need to pull in, you know. We don't need to depend on all Australian banks, you know, that are in enough trouble with their own real estate bubble that's going to burst and bring them all down. And we'll just be at the effect of that, holding on to the rubble. Somehow, this problem, this earthquake, you know, we need to bring our architects together. We need to bring our engineers together. We need to bring our creatives and our financiers together. We need to bring our money together. We need to bring our hearts together. We need to bring our community together and find out what Christchurch can do for itself, and we can lead the world just because we have this opportunity to reconstruct. And, you know, this is really, I'm so thrilled to be here, really, and I'm so thrilled to talk to you and say that, okay, this is all known by the ancients anyhow. It's already known. But these are the discoveries we can make. This is what we can ask people to bring their courage to and actually face their fears right now, you know, their family and their community and their boss and their customers and their fear of really feeling the rejection that, hey, my product's no good, you know, and I can't compete with the Chinese labor, or, you know, I mean, there's a million things happening in the interaction, and we have to kind of feel it. It's just like the acknowledgement that we have to acknowledge that we're not willing to acknowledge about First Peoples and about other peoples and about other parts of the world, and we're not willing to really acknowledge our doubts about ourself and our capability to get along with our fellow man, and starting at home. And that's what I'm doing here, and I'm glad to be here with you.
That's great. Yeah. Change is happening. I can look back over 20 years in New Zealand, 25 years, and I see incredible change around race, around acknowledging mana. You know, these things are happening. I believe that in the future, the planet's going to have to address things a lot faster, and the change is going to be faster. But you can't stop change. Change is the imperative. It's just there.
For our age, it's already really faster right now, you know.
Yeah.
And you're saying now it's even going to go way faster, so that
exactly.
We're going to be there's no standing on your feet anymore, really.
No.
We're just swimmers.
Yeah. True. We just have to be good swimmers.
Very. It's such a pleasure to be with you, to feel your energy, to sit in this house and to let the sun fall on us, and I don't know. I say we give these guys a chance to go get a snack. We'll come back at them later with 2 barrels blazing.
It's been lovely. I've enjoyed your questions. Yeah, very lovely. Thank you.
Barry Brailsford. So we'll be back and we'll look deeper into the Waitaha and see what details we can peel out. So thanks for being here, and bye for now.